Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely massive and honestly, pretty fascinating. We're looking at the ultimate blueprint for managing one of the most huge, incredibly diverse nations on the planet. We are talking about the Indian Constitution, and more specifically, we're unpacking union-state relations. Because when you've got a country this large, figuring out exactly who is in charge of what, well, that's not just basic politics. It's literally a monumental feat of engineering. So think about this for a second. How exactly does one single constitution balance power across an entire subcontinent? I really want you to consider the sheer logistics of this. We're talking about wildly diverse regions, completely different local economies, and incredibly distinct needs on the ground. Setting up the governance of India isn't just about, writing down a few laws. It's a massive, complex logistical puzzle. How do you give local regions the autonomy they absolutely need to govern themselves, while at the exact same time keeping the whole nation unified and moving forward together? Okay, so here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, a blueprint for shared power. Second, who makes the rules. Third, running the nation together. Fourth, following the tax money. Fifth, planners and financial referees. And finally, number 6, the balance of federalism. Let's jump right in. Section 1, a blueprint for shared power. The foundation. Right off the bat, the Indian Constitution establishes a federal system. Basically, power is shared between the national government, the union, and the individual states. You can kind of think of it like a giant joint business venture. But, and this is a big but, there's a catch, it is designed with a deliberately strong center. So while power is definitely shared, the central government holds ultimate authority in a few key areas, just to keep things from, falling apart. It's a partnership for sure, but it's one where the union holds just a little bit more weight to keep the nation totally unified. Section 2. Who makes the rules? Legislative relations. Okay, if the country is a shared household, the 7th schedule is basically the master list of how we divide up the chores. It explicitly maps out who gets to make laws using 3 very distinct lists. First, you have the Union List, which gives Parliament exclusive power over big national issues, things like defense, foreign affairs, banking, railways. Then you've got the State List, which lets state legislatures handle local, day-to-day issues like police, public health, agriculture, and local government. And finally, there's the Concurrent List. This covers shared areas like education, forests, marriage. Though keep in mind, if there's ever a conflict there, the union law generally wins out. But what happens if something completely new pops up? Something the original drafters of the Constitution couldn't have possibly foreseen? Well, that brings us to residuary powers. Any subject that isn't mentioned in those 3 lists we just talked about is residuary subject. And who gets to make the laws on these? Parliament. Which brilliantly highlights that point we made earlier. Any leftover or totally unforeseen powers default right back to that deliberately strong center. And the center's power doesn't just stop at those leftover subjects. The really crucial point here is that Parliament can actually step right into the state's territory and make laws on stateless subjects. But, and this is important, only under very specific high-stakes conditions. We're talking during a national emergency, or when the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution declaring that it's absolutely in the national interest, or when states explicitly ask Parliament to make a law for them, or if it's needed to implement an international agreement. So it's rare, but the power is definitely there. Section 3. Running the nation together. Administrative relations. Now, to actually keep these cooperative gears turning smoothly on the ground, the Constitution sets up rules for administrative control. First and foremost, states have a non-negotiable obligation. They must ensure their local administration and laws actually follow the Constitution. And to guarantee this happens, the union government has the power to issue direct orders to states, especially when it comes to protecting national interests, implementing parliamentary laws, or maintaining major communication systems. But interestingly, it's not a one-way street. Functions can actually be delegated both ways. The union can hand powers down to the states, and the states can entrust functions right back up to the union. Even with all those rules in place, let's be real, disagreements are totally bound to happen. When administrative things get tense, the Constitution has a built-in mediator, the Interstate Council. This was established under Article 263 and brought to life back in 1990 based on the Sarkaria Commission. Chaired by the Prime Minister, this council essentially steps in to talk out disputes between states, promote coordination, review overlapping policies, and recommend better ways to cooperate. It's basically the ultimate pressure valve for the federal structure. Section 4, following the tax money. Financial relations. So, who gets to collect and actually spend the tax money? I mean, it's arguably the most important question in any shared relationship, right? Running a massive country is incredibly expensive, and figuring out how to divide the financial resources between the center and the states is this highly complex, constantly negotiated process. To handle this, the Constitution meticulously divides up the revenue streams so both national and regional needs get funded. The tax powers are explicitly split. The Union collects the really big ticket items. We're talking income tax, customs duties, corporation tax, and the central GST. Meanwhile, the states get to collect their own specific taxes, things like state excise duty, land revenue, stamp duty, and taxes on vehicles or entertainment. This whole setup guarantees that both levels of government have their own dedicated, reliable source of income. But what happens when a state's dedicated income just isn't enough? Because obviously, not all regions have the exact same economic advantages. Well, that is where grants and aid step in. This is direct financial assistance provided by the union to the states. They can be statutory or discretionary, but their core purpose is absolutely vital. They exist specifically to reduce financial inequality among the states and to fund specific development programs. It's the mechanism that ensures poorer regions aren't just left behind to fend for themselves. Section 5, Planers and Financial Referees, Key Institutions. First up, we have the ultimate constitutional referee for the money, the Finance Commission of India. Set up under Article 280, this body is appointed by the president every 5 years. It's made up of a chairman and 4 other members, and their job is massively important. They are the ones who recommend exactly how the taxes collected by the center should be sliced up and shared with the states. They also suggest the rules for those grants in aid we just mentioned and figure out ways to bolster local government finances for panchayats and municipalities. Basically, every 5 years, they hit reset on the math for the shared bank account. And building right on top of that, we have Niti Aayog. This replaced the old Planning Commission back in 2015, and it acts as the modern strategic planner. Chaired by the Prime Minister, Niti Aayog is essentially a massive policy think tank. It's not just about handing out money, it's about providing high-level strategic advice, drawing up long-term development strategies, and evaluating programs. It actively promotes both cooperative and competitive federalism to really drive innovation and sustainable growth across the board. Just to really cement the difference here, the Finance Commission is a strictly constitutional body that pops up every 5 years purely to deal with the hard math of distributing taxes and grants. Niti Aayog, on the other hand, is a permanent institution. Its focus is entirely on long-term policy planning, giving strategic advice, and fostering cooperation. They definitely work in tandem, but they have very, very distinct roles in the grand scheme of things. Section 6, the balance of federalism. Conclusion. Look, if there is one core takeaway you get from this entire explainer, it really should be this: cooperative federalism. As we've seen, the Constitution deliberately built a strong center, but the whole machine, from the legislative lists to the Interstate Council to the Finance Commission, it relies entirely on both levels of government actually working together. They absolutely have to cooperate in areas of common interest if they want to sustain a unified nation. The blueprint is genius, but it only works if the builders are actually talking to each other. Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought. Does a strong center truly unite the nation? Or does the real, everyday power actually lie in the states? It's this incredibly delicate, ongoing balancing act that the Indian Constitution manages to pull off every single day. And as policies inevitably shift and the economy grows, this relationship between the union and the states is just going to keep evolving. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the blueprint of power. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you in the next explainer.